Hello, welcome to the San Francisco Shock Team Preview. It's myself, Sideshow, joined with Jaws, Avast, and Jonathan to discuss how the San Francisco Shock will fare in 2022. I want to start with Jaws. Is this team going to be able to take a trophy? Shock have won 2 before in the past. Can they win it again?
Let me count real fast, okay? I know that's difficult for a lot of Overwatch enthusiasts, but I'm going to count exactly how many players they lost last season. Choi, FD God, Glister, Nero, Tayo, Twilight, Arns, Smurf, Striker, and Arns again. So 9, but maybe 10. So are they going to be able to win a season with only 2 remaining players? Probably not, at least not at the start. That these, if we're doing like the tournament structure again, probably not going to be doing all too well, to be honest with you. But I think a lot of the players that they've brought in could potentially be up there with the best in the league for sure. Will they win the league overall? Judging by the strengths of some of the other teams, I honestly don't think so.
What do you think? I feel like it's not a hot take, obviously, because there's a lot of people all fighting for the championship. Like saying they were guaranteed to take the championship would be a hot take. But it feels like you don't have very much faith in this team. I think this team's fairly stacked, actually.
No, I don't have no faith. I have a lot of faith that, especially people like Proper, who is destined to be in the fucking league for a long while and obviously just wasn't 18. I've got a lot of faith in the roster doing well. Do I think it'll win the entire year?
Right.
I don't know, man. Like some of the other teams have gone and picked up a very good players or stuck with a lot of their strong players. I think early on it's going to be a little bit rough for them for sure. New game, new players with only 2 returning ones. They're going to be good. They're definitely going to be in the top 5 towards the end of the year. Absolutely, if not higher. But to begin with, it's going to be a little rough.
Avast, I know you're a tier list Terry. You put him in your top. I was struggling there. You're a tier list Terry.
That's actually, I like that one. I can't remember where I put them, but I don't think it would be inconceivable for them to win this year.
You would have them in your upper tier, your S tier?
Definitely. Oh, definitely. I think, like, I've already stated this opinion before, but I think Super is the best overall tank player going into Overwatch 2 in terms of, like, he can play both main tank and off tank. So I have that going on for him. Obviously, it remains to be seen to what level he's going to perform, especially as the tanks change heading in, right? Like, there's no guarantee just because Super's really flexible in Overwatch 1 that his skills going to remain as high in Overwatch 2. Like, there is no guarantee about that with the hero changes and rework and stuff. But I think, you start from there, that's better than pretty much every team can really say, aside from some of like the other contenders talent coming up. Almost no team has players that have been proven that they can play both roles already. So they already have that going on. Also, a backbone and the leader of the team, which is really important. And there's no chance to really sub him out now because Smurf's no longer there.
Yeah.
You can't play DPS.
I can't play DPS, but it doesn't matter because you have the next, what some are saying is the second coming of Christ, the Proper on DPS.
Proper,
and who is very, very hyped up. Arguably their biggest pickup in the offseason. Most people would say, I think, is Proper.
Definitely.
He's a fucking monster. He is just a monster. He is really, really good. He's hyperflex too, so he's someone that can fill like a lot of different roles if they need him to, but will probably be mostly hitting like a lot of that tracer and hit scan, or maybe not so much hit scan, but rather tracer and like flex DPS type of roles. And then they have Finn, who a lot of people state is like, he's definitely much more hit scan oriented. A very hard hit scan player, or not Finn, I should say Kilo.
Yeah.
Finn's their flex support pickup, but rather Kilo, who's like super hard hit scan oriented. He's been really, really high peaks. He's like kind of monstrous. He reminds me like at times at his peak, like he could compete at that like really high level with like the Onzes of the world. But he is like super mechanically inconsistent. And like when you went back and watched their matches, and you could see that inconsistency hit him at times, and it's why they like subbed him out for like Merritt, who is now in like on Houston Outlaws, because he was like a lot more consistent than Kilo, but Kilo just had insanely high peaks. So if they can rein that in, I think their DPS line is competing already at like the top 3 DPS lines. If they're able to bring that like Kilo in.
From what I remember as well, Proper did have some nasty hit scan talents too.
Yeah,
he's like a full-on, all-round
so
hyperflex player. Yeah, I think I kind of, it's hard to start in one fixed place with the Shock because I'm excited about many different parts of their roster. But I kind of want to roll things back to the conversation around Super again, because you were saying, Jack, that they've only kept 2 players, which is right. They've kept Super and Violet. When we were making our greatest of all time lists, these are 2, I believe, that won it, right? Didn't we have Violet at the top and Super at the top of the lists?
Super won. I don't think Violet won.
Did Violet not win?
No, he was like, did he win?
Yeah, I thought he won. I thought he won.
I can't remember.
That was why it was so controversial, because people argued he couldn't play Ana, and so he didn't deserve to be number 1.
Okay, my point being, even if he didn't get number 1, right? Even if he was number 2 or whatever, the argument would still be pretty similar, which is these are candidates for like greatest of all time players. Never mind what role they're in, and they're definitely greatest of all time candidates for their roles as well. Thinking about the roles that they're specifically in this team, though, they aren't just one-to-one maps of their Overwatch 1 success. Super is the only tank on the team, and he's being asked to fill all of the roles. Violet is presumably being asked here to play all of the main support roles as well, if they become necessary. So he'll be picking up the Brig, which is already showcased. He has a really good Brig, but then also Lucio or Mercy or whatever the fuck else, the other roles that he would have to play. So just focusing for a moment on Super and Violet, should we be expecting these GOAT-level performances from them next season because of the context of the team that they're in? What do you think?
I think for Super you can, because we know how mechanically skilled he is, and we know how versatile he is. You know, he can play main tanks, he can play off tanks, and so I think we can come out with the Overwatch League and say that Super is probably going to be one of the most important tank players in the league, because whereas other teams, they have to look at a duo, perhaps flexing around, some play off tank, some play main tank. We know that Super is capable of to play both off tanks and main tanks at a really high level, and I think he's going to be a staple pillar of this San Francisco Shock team. For Violet, I have no idea. I really don't know. I think this is absolute madness, and in many ways, I think San Francisco Shock, whether they want to admit it or not, I fully expect them to sign players before the roster deadline, whenever that is. And I think they are one of these teams who look at their roster going into Overwatch 2 saying, we don't know what Overwatch 2 is going to be like. We don't know what it's going to play like. And so we want to keep a few roster slots open for us to sign additional players to round this squad out when the Overwatch League starts. Because otherwise, I'm very much worried about what you just highlighted, Josh. Maybe it is the case that Super can't play a certain hero, or maybe he can play it, but he can't play it at a top tier level.
Doomfist is a tank.
I mean, who knows about that, right? I mean, maybe we'll see like triple DPS lineup if that's the case. I have no idea. But most specifically, I think it's an even more important question when you talk about Violet. Are you fully expecting him to swap over to like Lucio and Mercy on a full-time basis and provide top tier performances at those heroes if he needs to do it? And are you going to win stages, stuff like that, compete for the top slots in the league with him playing main support? I am very skeptical of that. So when I look at the hero flexibility of this team, the hero pool of this team, I think overall they're really skilled, but I think there's some red flags about this team if you want to predict them to be one of the top tier teams in the league.
Interesting.
Definitely in the support line, for sure. Like that inconsistency with no proper main support player. I'm very surprised they got rid of FD God, to be honest with you. I really am. Not sure if they just didn't renew his contract or like...
But even like Moth. Like,
sure. Yeah.
If you like Moth, if he doesn't demand, like, I don't know, some ridiculous salaries, like, hey, I want $1 million a year, okay? If we expect Moth to continue to want to play in the league, maybe he's looking for a team. If we think that he's rational about, like, money stuff as well, why wouldn't you realistically sign Moth to round out the squad? Because it's exactly what they're missing.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've definitely talked about that issue a couple of times with the Moth issue, but I do think that I just think Shock are probably sold on the paradigm of like, we have double flex support and we'd rather Violet try to potentially learn stuff. Like some teams are like, just lean into double flex support.
But that's crazy to me that you would pigeonhole yourself that much.
I mean,
you know what I'd like to see? I'd really love someone that's dedicated to taking on this task to go and look at all of Violet's Lucio gameplay from last season, because when I was watching it in the matches and when I was casting it, I was trying to keep a specific eye on Violet's Lucio. And from what I saw, it looked pretty cap. Like the guy's mechanics, he's just like a floor Lucio a lot of the time, like off, not really like always understanding what his role is supposed to be, getting good value in certain areas, but not a well-rounded player, I would say. But I haven't gone through the replay viewer and looked at all of the decisions that he's made and been like, in there in the comms with them and stuff. So I don't feel super confident about making that assessment that it was pretty poor this season. But it felt pretty poor from like a big picture standpoint, just watching his movement around the map and what his decision making was. So I'd love somebody out there. Maybe Custer's got some time on his hands with the old replay viewer to go and have a look through some of those games. What, sorry?
I tried logging in the other day. I think it's down.
Oh, it's down? Oh, well, rest in peace. All right, well, that was an idea that could have worked a few months ago, but doesn't work anymore. But I think, that's definitely something that I would highlight as being an issue for them. But if it's Brig, if they're playing Ana Brig, or if they're playing Ana Zen, or if they're playing Bap Zen, or whatever, this support line looks fantastic.
It's going to be great.
Yeah. Like, if they get the right double flex support meta or a Brig anything meta, I still really believe in Violet and Finn being an extremely good support line.
Yeah, I think the support line's really good.
It's hard to say where the game actually leads itself, to be fair. And I think, obviously, the heavy reliance on having a Lucio player on your team has been and will continue to be a big thing in Overwatch 2, because it's the only character that can give a team-wide speed boost to other characters. You know what I mean? Like, I think, in general, not knowing what the meta is, but I've been kind of theorizing maybe it's probably going to be dive, because supports get way less peel, way less protection, because we have no off tank anymore, or like double shield, for example. Like, there's way less of that. So dive just and execute in the backline as quickly as you possibly can. I feel that's the way Overwatch 2 is looking. On the fucking surface, no clue what it's going to look like, but that's the way my brain's been working. And having a Lucio in that instance, I think is pretty damn important. We could see some crazy stuff where we have like Lucio Zen, like we did a long time ago, you know what I mean? But the reliance on Lucio, I think, is going to be quite high, especially going into a brand new game, because playing really fast like that is going to throw, I think, a lot of new players and a lot of teams that have majority of new players. It's going to throw them off because there's a lack of synergy there. Although with the Shock, on the other hand, maybe that's not so much a problem, because a lot of them have come from O2 Blast, which I think is a big plus for this team. They've got 3 players from O2 Blast, and 2 of them are DPS players. Like, that's sick. If you, obviously, Sam is probably going to be filled a little bit for sure, but if you're sticking with like Kilo and Proper, you're not going to have that weakness I think a lot of other teams are going to have, where the synergy is lacking because you've axed half your roster, or you're bringing in new key parts to it.
Yeah, let's pivot away from Super and Violet for a moment to talk about that trio then. Finn, Kilo, Proper. So it's not like it is the core of the roster for sure, because it's probably going to be, 2 or 3 out of 5 of their active roster at any point in the game. But it's not a core in the sense of like they're always going to be working together, in the same way of like if you had their main tank with both of the DPS, where they're like always going to be synced up together all the time. It's a flex support on both DPS. But having said that, it's still incredibly beneficial to them. So these players have been really successful over the course of their contender seasons. Proper has been dominant for so long, and we'll talk about him individually later, but the team that they were on, O2 Blast, won back-to-back contender seasons. They were right up at the top there. They've got crazy individual talents as well. If you were going to try and pick a core from any of the teams coming into this season, I think it makes sense that it would be these.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing is just more so Kilo is a very, very talented player. It's just like I said, he does have big ups and downs. So it is something to think about, like how consistent is him as a player going to be. Now he's going to be under the Shock style in Kojin, and there's a lot of room to like grow him under the Overwatch League competition. So we'll just have to see like where he evolves to. But I don't think Kilo is going to be a weakness per se. I just think that like when you want like championship level performances, you can't have players kind of vanishing. You just can't have that, especially in a game that's going to be more DPS centric. And they don't have anyone else to fill that role. I mean, they have Proper technically. I guess Proper could flex to that actually if they ever felt they needed to.
Yeah, if they run Proper and Sam
to play flex. So yeah, I mean they do have options theoretically, but obviously it depends like how good would you rate like Proper as like if you're going to put Proper against the best hit scans, like probably he'd still stand up, but like would you prefer to have him on the flex DPS over Sam? Like, so it is just like kind of like one of those things that you have with Hyperflex. So I do think their core is really, really good though. That's my only concern is like, does Kilo's consistency get rounded out?
Well, let's talk a little bit about Proper. Rookie of the Year candidate, I think, is obvious from the outset. Is he the favorite out of all of the rookies coming in this year?
I think he's the favorite by far.
Yeah.
The only thing that's held us back is his age. Like, he would have made the league if he was 18 last year. He would have made the league if he was 18 in 2020. You know what I mean? Like, he's been a consistent performer throughout his career in contenders. He has won, like you said, on O2 Blast, multiple championships. And O2 Blast, a convenience store of players. You walk in, you pick up a 3-pack like the Shock have, and you walk straight out again. You know, like this team is turning into the Runaway or the Element Mystic of 2021, 2022. They are a team that is just consistently giving talent. Giving talent to the Overwatch League and Overwatch League picking teams up. We've seen a lot of O2 Blast players from last year join the league in 2021. We're going to continue to see that over the next few years. I think Proper is the most hyped. And I want to know your guys' thoughts, actually. Is he going to be more hyped than Sparkle coming into the league? Because in my mind, and I have mad bias, I think Sparkle is one of my favorite players and it has been for a long time. And him joining the league was like, holy shit, again, the second coming of Christ. Is this the third coming of Christ with Proper? Because I think
we have a lot of branch religions.
We do. Even with my like biases towards Mystic and Sparkle, because I've watched and cast them for such a long time, I think Proper might be a little bit more hyped and is going to be better than Sparkle joining the league.
I based on how people are talking about Proper and from what I've seen myself, I think Proper is probably the biggest contenders pickup in the history of the Overwatch League. And I think, I mean, what are your candidates? Your candidates are like Haxel.
The entirety of Runaway.
I mean, the whole of Runaway. And then also you've got like, in terms of like their results immediately, you've got kind of like Violet coming onto the Shock. I mean, I don't know whether you mean in terms of hype coming in or results afterwards.
Not results. I don't know how they're gonna do. You know, we're talking about. I'm talking individually here. Like, what is the biggest individual talent coming in to the Overwatch League? And I think it's probably alongside your like Haxel in season 2, because people already that they knew how good Haxel was from Apex, of course, and so they were like, holy shit, we finally get to see Haxel in season 2, right? And it's probably Sparkle, but Proper to me, like the way people are talking about him as like a given to just win Rook of the Year and how he just takes over some of these team fights for O2 Blast. Like nothing against O2 Blast, but when trying to research that team, it's just straight up like Proper winning team fights by himself sometimes. It's like you see the enemy team, whether it's T1 or Talon or whatever, they get like 2 picks and they're like, oh, they're a 6 versus 4 against O2 Blast. And then Proper's like, oh, I killed your entire backline. Sorry, it's 4v4 and we win the fight now. So like it's crazy how much he's so good that he overshadowed the rest of his team. Like
it's not just this team Pelican, as well. Yeah, when he played with Pelican,
he overshadowed Pelican.
I know.
Who was a role star this past year? Yeah. That's nuts. Like he's that good. And so I think maybe it's a hot take, but I don't think it's unimaginable that Proper could be the greatest contenders talent having been promoted to the Overwatch League. So yeah, the Pelican argument is one way to put it. Like he overshadowed Pelican, who we now respect so much because of what he displayed in 2021. And also, I have a little hot take folder, and I showcased this on an interview series I did with Yiska. When I researched the league and the talent and everything, I write down like hot takes. So that I don't put them out in public, but I write them down. So I have a little cache.
You have a bank of them.
Yeah, and so I don't believe this hot take, but I thought it was a really funny hot take, and so I'm gonna give it to you guys, and you can assess it and judge it and see if it's a hot take. But I don't fully believe it. Okay, so this is don't believe this is reinforced. He's crazy again. He's off the goop, whatever. But Proper is so good that one could realistically say like, Proper is going to come into the league and reputationally do to Profit what Jonak did to Rejay Hong in 2018. Which is just come in and revolutionize the role and just like set the bar, like just raise the roof immeasurably. We've never seen anything like it. So I don't believe that hot take, but he's that good that I really did have fun with that small line.
You know what the mad thing about that is as well? It wouldn't make sense in any other season, but you are heading into a new game. So in some sense, you know, there is actually that space for you to have that much of an improvement. Like you can't actually, if we were playing Overwatch 1,
revolutionized through Overwatch 2. No.
I think there's going to be.
There are going to be times. Sorry, Josh. I'm taking up a lot of room now. There's going to be a time where one new Overwatch talent will come in and just revolutionize the way you play the game and just take it one more level. I am confident at some point we'll get that. Maybe it's not proper, but it's fun to.
But I feel like those are two different instances, though, right? Because like Jaehong revolutionized it in that like you changed the way that we viewed how you play around flex supports a bit. While we are like, I don't exactly know how else can you pocket a Genji with Nanoblade harder? Like, is that even? Yeah. I don't even understand what more you could do. Like there was a systematic shift in how we approached how you support your flex support and build your team around a flex support with Jaehong, with Jaehong versus JJoNak, versus like everyone knows pocket the Genji when he pops the blade. You know, like everyone already knows.
Ans did it in 2020. Ans just took hit scan to another level.
But I don't
know. On an individual basis,
it didn't change. But also, it didn't change how we view hit scan as a role. It just changed like the talent of it. You know, like the JJoNak is literally a fundamental shift of like how we flex support.
Yeah. So, but I think it's a fun hot take, and also I do think that it brings to mind the kind of people that Proper should be compared against, which is like Leave this season or Pelican this season. People who hard carry their teams. And I think that's going to be the kind of performance you should expect from Proper this year. Whether he can live up to it is a different matter, but he's done it every year so far. And it's not like he's 18, but he's not a rookie. He's more like a Haxal or, you know, something like that, where he's been playing for a shit ton of time when he's been younger. And so there's no reason to believe that he should have a massive drop-off just because he's entered the Overwatch League. Looking at the team holistically, though, the other piece of the puzzle is Sam, a guy that we haven't really mentioned too much, who's going to be filling the flex DPS kind of role for this team. And he's previously played for the American Tornado Corps, who then became Redbirds when they, I guess, went and signed collegiate stuff. I still don't quite understand what happened there. But he has been part of this core roster that has done incredibly well in North American contenders. He definitely feels like the kind of person that is going to be playing second fiddle to Proper, but that's the same with Kilo. You know, Proper's going to be in 100% of the time, and then Sam's going to be in if you need a Hyperflex and Flex DPS instead of a Hyperflex and hit scan meta, right? Is there reason to believe that this is going to be any different than what I've said? That Sam will, I don't know, take over the game or be a flop? I feel like he's just going to be an extremely serviceable, in fact, a very good to great Flex DPS that's just second fiddle to Proper because Proper's a god.
I think it's going to be especially interesting because I think Sam already played second fiddle to like Speedily on American Tornado. So he's essentially just he's graduated fiddles, and he's become the best second fiddle ever. Because don't you
think that's quite in tradition with Shock though? That's actually perfectly aligned with how
I mean, also it's the most time ever where like you could get play time is heading to Overwatch 2 to where like having excess players, like having these players that you might not necessarily play originally, like there is no better a chance for you to get play time than heading into Overwatch 2.
But Shock are known for like permabenching players. Like I really hope that doesn't happen because he's clearly quite a talented player. But yeah, playing second fiddle to Proper, absolutely. People are going to get those names confused all the time, by the way. Profit and Proper, Jesus Christ! Thank God they're in different hemispheres, which is great. But I just hope that Shock don't do what they've done before. And with a smaller roster, it doesn't really feel like they will.
I don't see how you could either, to be honest, unless it's just straight up like Ash Tracer meta all season long.
Yeah, especially with the Hyperflex and like. The game's going to be evolving over the coming months anyway when Overwatch League does first initially play their few games. So we're definitely going to see Sam a lot early on, I can imagine, because having that flexibility is going to be super nice and not having to heavily rely on a long-range hit scaling. Yeah, I'm excited for it, honestly. And it's good to see a lot of American contenders players moving up too, because there is a lot of talent in tier 2 that haven't made it up. And like this year has been a really good year for American Tornado, Dark Mode NA, Redbird Esports, like those teams or players that have been on those teams making their way up to the league. And Sam is one of those players. So it's good to see that pipeline working, which it's definitely been criticized for in the past.
Do you think the Shock have a better season next season than they did this time?
Oh, that's a good bar, honestly.
Over, under this season. Where did they finish, actually? Because I can't quite remember. 4th?
Atlanta beat them.
Let's find it real quick.
So, they finished behind Atlanta, Chengdu.
Season.
Sorry, they finished behind... Wait, oh God, I've forgotten already. They finished behind Dallas, Atlanta, Shanghai. Yeah. But I think their overall season, I would have power ranked them under Chengdu Hunters as well. You know what I mean? Like, they literally didn't finish in that position, but I would have said they had a less successful season overall than a Chengdu Hunters too. But if we're thinking about them literally finishing 4th and being, 5th, 6th maybe in our power rankings, I literally can't remember where we put them at the end of season power rankings, but is it over under this season?
I think also you're being a little unfair because Shock literally beat Chengdu in the playoffs. Well,
but
Shock
over the course of the entire season,
yeah, sure.
Chengdu made it to more of the tournaments. Chengdu made it to the finals of a tournament.
I'm just saying that I don't view them as like fun. I view them as pretty neck and neck over like all of last year in terms of like their overall performance for the year.
All right, but my point being,
your
over
point
under
being
4th place.
I think that this system, the system here, if everything goes the plan meta-wise, I would argue that they're probably more set up to be better this year. I think their DPS line with Proper added to it, and if Kilo gets reined in, or maybe if they have double flex, like is looking really good. I think their tank line is looking the most solid coming in there with Super. I think Violet and Finn like are an amazing support line in the right meta. But I think a meta could break this team like a main support meta. I think a main support meta could break this team. I think if Kilo just has like a bad like couple stages or something, it could break this team if they need him. Like it could be hey, their whole team could be broken if somehow Super just doesn't like flex as well as he should onto other tanks as well. There's a lot of like key points here that they don't have a lot of backups for. That if anything goes wrong, their year gets broken. I think.
Right.
But overall, if everything goes right, I think they're probably in a more of a chance to succeed looking back in hindsight than they were last year. So.
Yeah, it's so hard.
Especially with their coaching staff changes too, because they brought back like some of their errant coaches, like 9K.
True. Yeah.
I think they're bang on, honestly.
Which I think rounds off a lot of their issues that they had last year of like maybe they weren't able to. Pressy may be a great head coach, but maybe he needed some of that support staff to actually get the most results out of the squad.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. There's going to be at least one team that probably, just talking likelihood, that drops off compared to last year with some pretty major changes going on, whether it's the Gladiators shifting up some of their roster, bringing in Ans and Parifan, or if it's Atlanta Reign changing up stuff with Pelican going to Houston Outlaws, Washington Justice doing some reiterations. There's going to be one team that probably performs worse than last year, one team that performs better than we expect them to do. I think Shock remains the same. I think I'm not fully convinced by the roster, considering some of the red flags we brought up with the main support, even like some of the DPS flexibility next to Proper. To be honest, Proper is going to be the mainstay, but like how does Kilo and Sam play alongside him? I think they remain about the same, but I think there'll probably be one team from last year, maybe like Houston is even like better than Shock this year. But I think they're very solid pickups. I think they remain around the same.
Because the competition, Shanghai, Chengdu, Gladiators, like there are other teams in the league that have insane rosters too, that are really difficult to kind of map out in your head where would they land above or below. I
think with a main support and like rounding out the roster, I'd be incredibly more confident in Shock.
Right.
But I don't think they're there yet. I think they're like 85% the way to the roster I'm confident in.
I just want to throw this final question out there as well. When we're talking about Proper, right? Do you think Proper is going to be more impactful for the Shock than Striker was or Arns was. Because both of those players, you could argue at various times throughout Shock's history, but I mean, 2020, Arns and Striker together. 2021, you had Striker too. But, or even earlier, if we're thinking about Striker's hard carry performances in Boston or whatever, these players are insanely good. Is Proper even higher than that? Because, in ranks of like all-time holy shit players, you've got like Leave, Arns, Striker is up there in terms of he's playing Tracer all the time. Tracer's meta. He's winning you games. Is Proper likely to have more impact than people that have already been through the Shock roster?
Or mathematically, yes. 5 people on the field.
Oh, I mean,
mathematically, if you look at the numbers, maybe yes, but no. Genuinely, I think so. Just because he can flex so much too. He's not a striker who, he can play the heroes, but definitely Tracer's his best. Arns, Widow, obviously his best. His Ashe, obviously exceptionally good too. But I think
if there is overall, a Tracer meta all year, Jack.
Yeah.
If there's a Tracer meta all year, which there could be, really easily could be a Tracer meta that lasts for the majority of the year. If Proper ends up playing Tracer, because Proper will be the Tracer for this team, if there's a Tracer meta, then you are directly one-to-one comparing him with Striker, right? Who the greatest Tracer player we've had in the league.
I think there's just so much pressure to put on Proper by himself in that regard. Because when you look at some of these players, like Arns had Striker and played alongside Striker. Like Striker was had an incredible 2020 when Arns was doing some of his best work on long range hit scan. 2019, I mean, you had Striker and Sinatra when we moved away after Goats. I mean, Rascal and Brigitte. Like Shock has always had an incredibly well-rounded top-tier DPS lineup, both of them. And so I think Proper will probably be as good individually as some of those guys. Maybe. I mean, that's the extreme part. Like, maybe he can be as good as those some of those higher tier players like Striker, like Arns, etc. But it's probably going to be harder for him, considering that he's playing alongside people like Kilo, like Sam. Because no disrespect, they're great pickups and they're great rookies, and I have faith that they're going to be very influential in Shock's performance this year. But those two are not on the level of Proper. They're not on the level of Rascal and the hero pool flexibility he contributed. They're not on the level of Striker. They're not on the level of Sinatra when he plays. So, like, I think
comparable though to Nero of last year.
Yeah,
like
and
Nero Striker.
Sure, but I mean that we saw that the DPS lineup,
DPS
the DPS lineup for Shock last year wasn't as overwhelming as it was in 2019, 2020.
Oh.
And so I think that's too much pressure to put on Proper to like live up to those standards, because he doesn't have the same support system, ironically enough, with no main support player. But so I think that's too much pressure to.
He's got to have the leave effect. He's got to
have the leave effect, yeah, which is harder in my opinion.
Sure, we've only ever really seen it kind of once. That was what made it so spectacular from Leave. All right, well, there's our San Francisco Shock team preview then. If you're a San Francisco Shock fan, I think there's a lot of things to be excited about with this roster, but some things to be aware of as well. It's not all roses. It's not all guaranteed W's. We're going to be doing a team preview next week. We'll be tackling the Boston Uprising, which, interestingly enough, is where Striker's disappeared back off to. So that's a fun little topic for us to crack into as well. Subscribe to the YouTube channel to watch that when it comes out next time.